Here are a couple of quick tips to help make setting up a MIDI system go a little smoother. First, when making MIDI connections, be sure to match up the notch on the end of the cable with the notch on the jack. These will vary in placement on different products, sometimes up, sometimes down, sometimes to the side. Second, only use cables that are specifically designed for MIDI. Third, be sure you use MIDI cables less than 50 feet in length. Any longer and MIDI data can become distorted and unusable. Also, if you plan to have more than 3 or 4 MIDI devices connected together, you might consider using a MIDI through box, also called a splitter or switcher. This allows each slave device in a system to receive data from the master at the same time. In systems 1 and 2, this really wasn't a problem because there were only 2 or 3 devices. However, each time MIDI messages pass from one device to another, there is a distortion of data and a slight time delay. By the time this reaches the 3rd or 4th device, this may become noticeable and start causing problems. A splitter takes data from one or more sources and sends it to several devices simultaneously, thereby eliminating the problem. Now, open your workbook to System 3A. Let's develop an even more sophisticated MIDI system that includes a master controller, a sequencer, a drum machine, and 2 rack mount tone generators. Let's say one of these is multi-timbral. Remember, that means it can produce several different sounds at once. Again, this master controller could be in any form: guitar, drum, wind, grand piano, even a vocalist with pitch to MIDI converter. Depending on your applications, you might consider a master MIDI controller with several rack mount tone generators to make a powerful and portable MIDI studio. This system also incorporates 2 time-based units, the sequencer and the drum machine. Many drum machines and sequencers will synchronize to a variety of timing signals, including MIDI clock. This means you can also set up a master-slave relationship with devices that work with time. In this system, let's say the sequencer will provide all master timing information. Therefore, we will need to set the drum machine to listen for and sync to the sequencer's internal clock. You can see this is another factor that determines the order of your MIDI devices when laying out a system. Notice that for this setup, we will have 2 different master controllers in the same system. At times, we will use the controller to play the tone generators and to record sequences. During playback, the sequencer is the master controller. The drum machine will sync to its clock, and the tone generators will respond to its outgoing MIDI messages. Therefore, we will use a splitter that has 2 inputs and 4 throughs. Think of the splitter as similar in function to a switchboard operator. All data will be routed using switches on its front panel. Its inputs handle sources of data. In other words, messages from master controllers. Its throughs are connected to the slave devices, passing incoming messages along to several devices simultaneously. A splitter also eliminates the need to physically plug and unplug cables. Everything stays plugged in, and messages pass through it and are routed to the appropriate devices. A splitter is also useful in a system where several devices do not provide MIDI through jacks. Notice that System 3 can be set up in a variety of ways depending on what you want to do. A MIDI controller, a sequencer, a drum machine, and 2 tone generators provide a high degree of flexibility and capability. Later, we'll add the splitter for an extra measure of convenience. Let's try 3 different configurations, all using the same group of equipment. Start with System 3A. Pause the tape now and make the appropriate MIDI and audio connections, where the MIDI controller is the master and everything else is a slave. You may have hooked it up like this: controller out to sequencer in, sequencer through to drum machine in, drum through to A's in, A's through to B's in. This daisy chain will allow you to create music into the